The oldest form of wealth in Britain is landed wealth. Long before there were corporations and banks, indeed long before there was a stable currency, wealth and power were measured by how much land you and your family owned. In medieval Britain, those who owned little or no land were forced to work for those who owned a lot of land. The National Trust and the Forestry Commission are now some of the biggest landowners, but astoundingly in 21st century Britain, some of the largest landowners are the same as they have been for hundreds of years: the royal family and aristocracy, the Church of England, and Oxford University.
The largest landowners in Britain is the Crown Estate. They own a combined property portfolio of around £8.1 billion. That includes agricultural land as well as urban properties. And this isn't the monarch's personal private land, but she receives an annual percentage revenue from this every year.
Well, the thing about the monarchy is there are two kinds of ownership. There's the technical ownership, the ownership of 6.6 billion acres of land, i.e. the land that ordinary people around the world in their millions are standing on, living on, working on, farming on, and all the rest of it. And then you can get down to beyond the sort of the abstract and the deeds and so on. You can actually look at the actual physical wealth, concrete land that's owned in this country, in this country alone. Of the 36,000 landowners who own half the wealth in the country. Now 36,000 might sound like a lot, but it's 0.6%, so less than 1% of the UK population own half of the land. Of the top 10 of these 36,000 people, so the top 10 of those, Prince Charles is the third biggest landowner in this country.
The Crown and another 26 aristocratic estates own a total of nearly 1.4 million acres of land, over twice the entire land area owned by the National Trust, and nearly 3 times the total land owned by the pension funds in the UK. So the land owned by the Crown and aristocracy covers an area over 3 times the size of Greater London, or as third much again as the total area of Cornwall. The Crown controls more than half of the UK's shoreline. Crown land is treated as a state asset, not to be sold by the monarch, and its revenues come to the state, and the Queen is paid a percentage of these profits. But the Queen can and does also own private property as a private individual in addition to Crown land.
There's a lot of huge estates which are still owned by members of the British aristocracy, including, of course, the royal family. There are also these peculiar feudal fiefdoms, which in a sense they are, the Duchy of Lancaster and the Duchy of Cornwall, both of which are large royal estates. The finances of the royal family are very complex. There's a whole series of different revenue streams, and of course much of it is shrouded in secrecy. But there are 2 basic sources of their wealth. One is that they receive direct grants from the state to fund their official functions and big expense accounts as well. And then they have their own private property holdings, some of which is property which belongs to the Crown, some of which is the private property of members of the Windsor family. Balmoral Castle and Estate and Sandringham Castle and Estate, for example, are both the private property of the Queen as an individual, that is, the private property, if you like, of Elizabeth Windsor, rather than belonging to the Crown. But it's all terribly complicated, and people are left guessing at the actual wealth of the Queen. One estimate, I think, is that it's about £350 million, her private wealth, but it is an estimate because so much of this is shrouded in secrecy.